Okay, so continuing chapter 11 and verse 2. Three kings in Persia. There will stand up three kings in Persia. This is what originally the angel came to explain to Daniel. Now, who are these three kings? Okay, actually, we have to understand here that we are speaking about both Media and Persia. Okay, we're talking about the Medo-Persian Empire, and as such, there are actually more than three kings totally. Okay, but if you look at who the three kings are who are being spoken about here, I'll give you all the kings, both the Medians and the Persians. Okay, I'll give you the names of all of the kings, and all of these kings, actually most of these kings are mentioned in the Bible except two. Okay, if you don't mind just. The most famous of all these kings is who? Who's the most famous of all these kings? Huh? No, 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 no. We're not talking about Babylon. We're talking about Medo Persia. Who's the most famous? Cyrus. Hands down. He is the most powerful, one of the most powerful monarchs. So, Cyrus, after Cyrus, you had a man named Cambyses. After Cyrus. Then, after Cambyses, you had a man named Smerdis. After Smerdis, you had a man named Darius I. After Darius I, you had a man named Xerxes or Ahasuerus. You read about him in Esther. Then after that, you have a king named Artaxerxes the first. Okay, and then you have another king named Darius the second. All these kings are given in scripture except Cambyses and Smerdis. Okay, these two are not mentioned anywhere in scripture, but all the other kings that I mentioned. Again, I'll give you the list. We start with Cyrus. Cyrus, you read of him in Ezra. Then Cambyses, Smerdis. Then you have Darius I. Darius I is mentioned in Ezra 5 and 6, Haggai and Zechariah. After Darius I, you have Xerxes. After Xerxes, you have Xerxes is the same person as Ahasuerus. He is mentioned in Ezra and Esther. And after Xerxes, you have Artaxerxes. Xerxes spelling Xerxes. Xerxes. Same person as Ahasuerus. After Xerxes, who is mentioned in Ezra and Esther, you have Artaxerxes. He is mentioned in Ezra, Nehemiah, and also in Malachi. The last king is Darius the II. Okay, all these kings I mentioned, how many total? 7. In these 7, the 3 important ones are Cyrus, the first one, Artaxerxes, 1, and then Darius the second. Okay, Darius the second. Now, when he says in verse 2, there will stand up yet 3 kings in Persia. The 4th king will be far richer than them all. That 4th king he's talking about is Darius the second. Darius the second. He is the 4th king that he's talking about here. Okay, Darius the second. Okay, now it says I want to read a quote from one commentary. We are now coming. Okay, Xerxes. Okay, just listen to this quote for a minute. After his great army had subdued virtually all of Greece down to the isthmus of Corinth, and the city of Athens had been reduced to ashes, Xerxes' navy was thoroughly worsted by the united Greek fleet at the Battle of Salamis in 480 BC. Now, what are we reading about? Okay, just bear with me here. By his strength, verse 2, through all his riches, he will stir up all against the realm of Greece. So, what is happening here? Medo Persia is going to war against Greece. Okay, so let me continue reading. I'm reading a quote from a commentary here. After his great army had subdued virtually all of Greece down to the isthmus of Corinth, and the city of Athens had been reduced to ashes, Xerxes' navy was thoroughly worsted by the united Greek fleet at the Battle of Salamis in 480 BC. This unexpected setback prompted him to beat a hasty retreat into Asia. The 100,000 man land army he left behind under the command of Mardonius was completely crushed in the following year by the allied forces of the Greeks at the Battle of Plataea. What is all of this saying? All of this is simply saying what? In very simple terms, that Greece has now defeated Medo Persia. Two great battles in history are quoted here. The Battle of Salamis in 480 BC, and then the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC. So, this is how the Medo-Persian Empire comes to an end. Then verse 3, a mighty king will stand up, he will rule with great dominion and do according to his will. Who is this? What does it sound like? Verse 3. Verse 3 is moving on from Medo-Persia to Greece. So who is this mighty king standing up and he will do according to his will? Who does it sound like? Say it loudly. Alexander. Alexander the Great. Okay, then his kingdom, when he will stand up, his kingdom will be, look at verse 4. When he will stand up, his kingdom will be broken or divided, and shall be divided towards the four winds of heaven. That means what? Four rulers, four heads, four rulers, right? The four generals, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Lysimachus and Cassander. They are not his heirs. They are not the children of Alexander. They are his generals. They do not have the, see, it says four winds of heaven and not to his posterity. In other words, it's not that Alexander's son or grandson is ruling, no. And then it says nor according to the dominion which he ruled. In other words, they do not have the kind, these four generals will not have the same kind of power, did not have the same kind of power that Alexander had, and they would also not retain their own power for too long. Okay. His kingdom will be plucked up even for others beside those. So Cassander ruled Macedonia, Greece. Lysimachus governed Thrace, Asia Minor. Seleucus took the rest of Asia except Lower Syria and Palestine, and Ptolemy reigned over Egypt and Palestine. I'll show you a map in a moment. I'll pass around the visual of a map. But what is being talked about here? What exactly are we talking about? The four rulers. Okay, that's what we're talking about. So Alexander had four generals, they ruled. In other words, they took all the land that he had amassed, all the countries that he had ruled, and they divided it among themselves. Okay, I'll show you what it was like in their day and age. Any questions, any doubts? Tell me. Nothing? Okay. Okay, here I'm showing you. This was in the day of what? What century are we talking about? Fourth. Century. Colonies. Syllabus. That's another lesson. So you can see these are the smaller ones. You can see these people own most. Where is Israel in all of this? Four, four syllables. They have the most. So where is Israel in this? Where would Israel be in this? The point is that so the point of all this is just to show how much of land these people actually grabbed from Alexander. Were they worried about the Greek kingdom? No, they were worried about their own dynasties. So each one took their own, and therefore the Greek kingdom after that was broken up. Now what happens is, okay, let me read this again. Cassander ruled Macedonia, Greece. Lysimachus governed Thrace, Asia Minor. Seleucus took the rest of Asia except Lower Syria and Palestine, and Ptolemy reigned over Egypt and Palestine. Uh, and then I've shown you what is in the maps, how that actually. Okay. Now let's read verse 5 to verse 35 onwards. No, up to verse 35. Let's read it. Now, what I want us to do, it's a very complex passage to understand. There's a lot that confuses and throws off the reader. Let's go through. Everybody has your Bibles open. Let's read one verse each. I will start with verse 5 and then we'll go this way. One by one. Okay? One by one. We'll keep reading one verse each till we complete. Verse 5 to 35. Verse 5. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him and have dominion. His dominion will be a great dominion.
And at the end of these some years, they shall join forces, for the daughter of the king of the south shall go to the king of north to the make an agreement, but she shall not retain the powers of her authority, and neither he nor his authority shall stand, but she shall be given up with those who brought her, and within him who begot her, and within him who strengthened her in those times. But from a branch who of her roots one shall arise in his place, who shall come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, and deal with them and prevail. He will also seize their gods, their metal images, and their valuable articles of silver and gold, and carry them off to Egypt. For some years, he will lead the king of the north alone. Also, the king of the north shall come to the kingdom of the king of south, but shall return to his own land.
You're reading the same verses. I think you're reading the same verses. 15. Okay.
He shall also set his face to enter in the center of his own kingdom, and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of the men to destroy, but she shall not stand with him or before him. After he shall he return his face unto the priestess, and shall take Mary, but a priest for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cause. Without his own reproach, he shall cause it to turn upon him.
Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he will stumble and fall and not be found.
There shall arise in place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom, but within a few days he shall be destroyed, but not in anger or in battle.
Hmm. 22. League. Hmm. 24. Yes.
marriage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be still up to battle with a great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall devise plans against him.
They that fear the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overthrow, and many shall fall on the same.
All these things shall be made among you, and they shall speak lies in the same way, but it shall not prosper, for the end will see when we still be in the appointed time.
And he shall return to his lands with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy government, and shall and he shall cast his will and return to his homeland.
At the time appointed, he shall return and come toward the south, but his shall not be as the former or as the latter.
For the ship, for the ship, for the ship from Cyprus shall come again in. Therefore it shall be with and return in with again with holy covenant, and to be so shall return and show regret for those who forsake the holy covenant.
Yes.
Forces shall be mastered by him, and they shall destroy the sanctuary fortresses. Then they shall take away the deadly sacrifices and raise their abomination of desolation.
And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall be corrupt by likewise. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits.
And they who understand among the people will instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, and by the flame, by captivity, and by spoil many days.
And when they fall, they shall be aided with little help, but many shall join with them by injury.
And some of those of understanding shall fall, to refine them, purify them, and make them white until the time of the end, because it is still of the appointed time.
Yes. So again, as we read these verses, what is the first thing that comes to your mind as you're reading all this? So much is happening, right, in these verses? So much is happening. This is actually, brothers and sisters, this is history being played out. History being given, world history. So much is. So what goes through your mind as you read these verses? You're wondering, who is she? Who is this daughter of the king? Who is this king of the north, king of the south? All of that, right? Why doesn't he give us the names? Why does he not give us the names? Right? Why does he not give us the names? Why doesn't he give us specific names, this king, that king? In previous places he gave us, right? Cyrus, Darius, very specific. Now why doesn't he give us? What could be the reason for not naming?
Maybe he's not unsure.
Huh?
He's not unsure about the things.
He's sure or he's unsure?
Unsure.
Yeah, he doesn't know. He doesn't know who they are. Even Alexander the Great, he never mentioned by name. Right? We know because we've studied history. But the point is that, see, the Bible is primarily a book of theology, not a history book. So, what God wants us to know in certain cases is not who did it, but what they did and how He worked through them. So, in certain cases, He chooses to reveal the names. In certain cases, He chooses to leave it unnamed so that the action might be elevated more than the person.
But there are those who identify the history.
Sorry?
But there are those who identify the history, not kingdoms or.
Yes, that is what we are going to do now. But in God's economy, He chose through Daniel not to mention the names of the king. In certain places He mentions it. Also, it's quite far away from Daniel's time and his age. Now, also another thing to notice about this, not only the names are ambiguous, also the chronology. When is this happening? How are we moving from one person, king of the south, king of the north, daughter of the king, this, that. There is no chronological connectivity. So then the question is, how does one interpret this very complex passage of names and events? How do we interpret it? How do we make meaning? Okay. What we are going to do is we are going to isolate characters characters per verse, from each verse, I should say, and then we are going to use history, as you said, to name and to identify who each person is, and we are going to show that all these events have actually been fulfilled. Okay, we are going to show that all of these events have actually been fulfilled. So, per verse, okay, verse by verse, if I were to give you uh, a table, okay, from each verse and give you a table, history will show us that there is actually a real person behind each of these designations: king of the south, king of the north. uh, we can go that way. Okay. Again, here I am not going to go through this because there are quite a few characters, uh, all the way. I'll just give you a few examples. Look at verse 5, king of the south. This is Ptolemy 1. Okay, I'm not going to give you all of these, but we'll go through it. Ptolemy 1, one of his princes, verse 5 again. This is Seleucus 1. Okay, then verse 6, king's daughter of the south, her name is Bernice. Okay, then another example, verse 8, king of the north. This is Seleucus the second, Seleucus 2. Verse 9, king of the south. This is Ptolemy the third, Ptolemy 3. Okay, then verse 13, I'm just giving you few of the names and examples. Verse 13, king of the north. Here you come to a person named Antiochus the third. Antiochus the third. Then verse 14, you come to a very interesting character. His name is Ptolemy the fifth. Ptolemy the fifth is only a boy, but he still made king. He's a very interesting character. Verse 14, king of the south, is Ptolemy the fifth, who is only a boy. He's a child king. Okay, then you come to verse 17. Verse 17 is another very interesting character, daughter of women. Verse 17, this name you would have definitely heard before. Her name is Cleopatra. Okay, verse 17, Cleopatra, daughter of women. Cleopatra is the daughter of Antiochus the third. Okay, she is a fully grown woman, but she is given as wife to Ptolemy 5. Who is Ptolemy 5? He is a boy. He is a child king. So Cleopatra, daughter of Antiochus the third, is given to wife as Ptolemy 5, who is a boy king. Just giving you some examples here. Okay. Now, from our standpoint in time, we can look at all of these. We can rely on history and we can say all of these events have already occurred. Okay. Now, if you ask me, so where did you actually study all of this from? Where did you take all of this information from? It didn't come to me in a vision. It didn't come to me in a dream. I actually studied this to put it together. So where did I take it from? I took it from Dr. Thomas Constable's notes on Daniel and also John Valbert's commentary on Daniel. I'm just telling you so that you don't think where did I get all this from. I'm telling you. Do you have in one of your readings, one of the commentaries that you will also have to read is Dr. Thomas Constable's notes on Daniel. Okay, I'm just letting you know because I do not believe in plagiarism. Okay, I didn't do this research on my own. I did my research, but I borrowed from others. There's nothing wrong in that because we didn't live during those times. We can't know things on our own. Okay, hope you understand what I'm saying. In other words, when you do your assignments, give credit where it is due. Don't say cut copy paste from somewhere and forget to mention the source. Never do that. If you are borrowing from other people, say we took it from such and such a source. That will be the correct thing to do. Okay, so let's come to Ptolemy 1, verse 5. He is a general of who? One of the generals of Alexander. What happened in 304 BC? Ptolemy I pronounced himself as the king of Egypt. Okay, he pronounced himself as the king of Egypt in 304 BC. Then, again in verse 5, we read of his prince, the prince of Ptolemy I. This is Seleucus I. He is another general of Alexander. He is seeking help from Ptolemy I and he becomes his prince. That is somebody who is under him. Then eventually what happens? Seleucus I becomes greater than Ptolemy I and he rules over all of Babylon. In that way, this Seleucus I becomes the king of the north. King of the north. Okay. So then what happens? Years later, in 250 BC, we read of a person named Ptolemy II. Ptolemy II is the successor of who? Ptolemy I. Naturally, very good. You are awake. Thank you. I'm just seeing if you are awake or you are awake. Ptolemy I. Then we have another person named Antiochus II. He is the successor of Seleucus I. What happens? This Ptolemy II and Antiochus II form an alliance through marriage. Verse 6. Verse 6. We read of the alliance that they form through marriage. What happens? Ptolemy II gives his daughter Bernice to Antiochus II as wife. Ptolemy II gave his daughter Bernice to Antiochus II as wife. But in order to do that, Antiochus II had to divorce his first wife. His first wife's name is Laodice. Laodice. Okay, but when Ptolemy II dies, Antiochus takes Bernice back. This is what it means in verse 6. He will not retain his power is given up. So now what happens? You have Antiochus II. How many wives does he have now? Two. Who are they? Bernice and Laodice. So Laodice is his former wife. When her husband dies, she is taken back by Antiochus II. So now there are two wives. A bitter Laodice murders Bernice and her infant, and later she poisons Antiochus II. Okay, Seleucus II was Laodice's son. Then we have Bernice's brother. I know this is getting confusing, but I have to look at it verse by verse. Then you have Bernice's brother Ptolemy III. This is verse 7. Verse 7. You have Bernice's brother Ptolemy III. he wants to avenge the death of his sister. Okay, who was the sister who was murdered? Who was murdered? Who did Laodice murder? Laodice murdered Bernice and Bernice's son. Okay, so now what's happening? Bernice's brother, Ptolemy III, verse 7, wants to avenge the death of his sister. So what does he do? He attacks Seleucus II. And he also murders Laodice. This is like a drama. Correct? Correct? But that's what it is. It's exactly what it is. So, when it says south, south means Egypt. Okay, south means Egypt. And Syria, which is not called Syria in Daniel's day, is the north. Okay, Egypt means south, Syria means north. So, Ptolemy the third, verse 8 now, Ptolemy the third returns from Egypt to Syria with idols and with treasure. That's what we read of in verse 8. Then Ptolemy the third in 240 BC, he makes a treaty with Seleucus II. Okay, Seleucus II. And then again I'm in verse 9, Ptolemy the third returns to Egypt. So the king of the south will come into his kingdom, he will return into his own land. So what you have to do is, the only way for you to understand things clearly is you have to go through the text and you have to label each where it says king of the south, who is this referring to. You have to put an arrow. That's what I've done in my Bible. You have to put an arrow and you have to label who this is referring to. Okay, so verse 9, he makes a return to Egypt. Now, verse 10, Seleucus III and Antiochus III are the sons of Seleucus II, Seleucus II. Both of them attempted to restore Syria to its former glory. But his sons, whose sons? The sons of Seleucus II, who are Seleucus III and Antiochus III, they attempted to restore Syria to its glory. Seleucus III and Antiochus III. Now, why is Antiochus III important? Why is Antiochus III important?
Because this man killed.
No. Antiochus III is important. Why? You tell me. You know the answer. Why is he important? It's a very common sense question. Antiochus III is important because
He take revenge because of this sister.
no, he is the father of Antiochus IV. We heard of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, right? We heard of him previously. This is his father. Understand? This is how. So what's happening in Daniel? If you take it in modern day understanding, you are first shown a movie about some incident that happened, and later you're given in the second part of the movie, which comes out after 1 or 2 years, you're given the backstory how this actually happened. So we already read of Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth. Now we are being told about how did he actually come onto the scene of world power. All of this drama, this king of the south, king of the north, Seleucus II, Seleucus III, Antiochus III. Then that is how Antiochus IV actually comes onto the scene of world power. Okay. So verse 10, Antiochus III and Seleucus III are attempting to restore the glory of Syria. Now in 219 to 217 BC, Antiochus III did something very important. Verse 10. He was successful in gaining control over Israel. Successful in gaining control over. This is where things get very up till now. Okay, fine. All of these details, blah 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 drama. But now it's very important because Israel is coming into picture. Verse 10. Okay, his sons will be stirred up, will assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come and overflow and pass through. Then shall he return and be stirred up even to his fortress. And the king of the south will be moved with rage and fury, and will come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north. He will set forth a great multitude, but the multitude will be given into his hand. Now, I want to read here again from Dr. Thomas Constable, quote, referring to verse 10, Egypt's northern border had until then been Syria, but Antiochus III drove the Egyptians, then led by Ptolemy IV, back to the southern borders of Israel. He earned the epitaph the Great because of his military successes. Who is being talked about here? Antiochus III, the father of Antiochus IV. Okay, then what's happening here? Ptolemy IV attempted to get back his territory, which was taken by Antiochus III, and he attacked the Syrians near the south border of Israel. This happened in 217 BC. This is verse 11, which I read for us. Verse 11. So there is this back and forth fighting between Antiochus, Ptolemy, Seleucus. Back and forth fighting is happening. Don't get lost in all the details. The point here is what's happening in Israel. That is the central focus. Because God is working through Israel. According to what? Daniel's vision. Originally, what did God promise to do? Originally, think back. No, think back even further. Why all of these other kingdoms are being mentioned, but why is Israel the focus? Yes, promise with Abraham. But mainly Abraham. Through you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. That is what is actual. Let's not lose sight. All of these details are there and they are interesting. Yes, they actually happened. But the main point is how is God working through Israel, to Israel, through Israel, and ultimately how will Christ come through all of this. So we must not lose sight of that. Okay, now I think we will have a break now in 2 minutes. Let me just complete this, then we'll pause it. So Ptolemy, in verse 11, we see there are multitudes, about 70,000 on each side. This is what we read in history. And Ptolemy IV is successful. Antiochus lost all of his army. He will set forth a great multitude, 70,000 almost, and the multitude will be given into his hand. Ptolemy is successful. Antiochus loses all of his army and he flees into the desert. Okay, then Ptolemy becomes very self-confident. Verse 12. When he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up. He becomes confident. He slays thousands of Syrians. He casts down many 10,000s, it says, verse 12. But he does not capitalize it. Okay, he will not be strengthened, it says. And he lets Antiochus go, verse 12. He lets Antiochus go. And Antiochus III, we are talking about here, who escapes, later returns in 203 BC. He comes with a larger army. The mistake that Ptolemy makes is he lets Antiochus III escape. So Antiochus III comes back in 203 BC with a greater army and having gained much more territory. Verse 13, the king of the north will return. He will set forth a multitude greater than the former and will come after certain years with great army and with much riches. He will come to take revenge on who? Ptolemy IV. Okay. Okay, we will just pause here for a minute. Come back. Please come back on time. Don't be late. Be here before 10:45. Be here 10:43 or 10:44 so we can resume the class. Thank you.